The Supreme Court heard oral arguments on affirmative action, an issue that many people haven't really thought about for some time. I really don't remember this issue coming up in a big way since I was in high school and Justice O'Connor was issuing opinions and crafting this some time ago. But it's back up in front of the Supreme Court. We're asking ourselves, is it constitutional to consider race in college admissions? Can you say that this person deserves a boost because of certain factors, certain variables, or not? Well, the U.S. Solicitor, her name is Elizabeth Prelogar, she made a very interesting argument about this today in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. In front of the U.S. Supreme Court, Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar made the argument that we need affirmative action so that we can right the inequities. And she pointed to the Supreme Court in particular and said, hey, you guys are pretty much a patriarchal institution.
The second category I would point to is the one I've already referenced, demographics. I think that can be relevant, again, not to set a quota, not to identify a precise numerical threshold, but in recognition that when there are extreme disparities in representation of certain groups, it can cause people to wonder whether the path to leadership is open. And if I could, maybe I could just give a common sense example of that I would hope would resonate with this court. The court is going to hear from 27 advocates in this sitting of the oral argument calendar, and 2 are women, even though women today are 50% or more of law school graduates. And I think it would be reasonable for a woman to look at that and wonder, is that a path that's open to me, to be a Supreme Court advocate?
Chauvinist.
Are private clients willing to hire women to argue their Supreme Court cases? When there is that kind of gross disparity in representation, it can matter, and it's common sense.
Saying that you, Supreme Court judges, maybe should take a look at your own house, all right? Bunch of bros in here. And, we need to think about correcting this with affirmative action. Maybe we should balance the old playing field, is what she says, and says that the law should allow that to happen in the form of affirmative action. We heard from Ketanji Brown Jackson. Ketanji is the newest addition to the Supreme Court, and she weighs in on the affirmative action debate. She says, hey, how is it harmful to anybody if we just give them a boost? I mean, if everybody is getting the same opportunity and we just kind of nudge people up a little bit and give you a couple extra points here and give you a little bit of benefit here and kind of just nudge you along over this way, does that really hurt everybody else? I mean, you're not holding anybody back. You're just helping somebody go forward. That's equality, right?
Yeah. Justice Jackson?
Can I just quickly return to Justice Alito's hypothetical, which I think is a little bit helpful in trying to pinpoint a problem that I've been having. It seems from the race hypothetical that if there was only one basis for giving someone a boost, and that basis was race, then I see disadvantage absolutely to anyone else who's not an underrepresented minority who can get that boost. But I understood.
Okay, so if you only have one variable, if you have 2 people and they're applying to a college or a university and they have equal factors, same GPA, same score, same test score, same extra, but one person has a demographical bonus because of a race, then we give you a boost up. Ketanji said, well, I can understand how that might be a problem because it's giving somebody a boost and it's holding somebody back because we're now distinguishing on the basis of race. And as we talked about on our members only walk and talk this morning, when we talk about race and religion and alienage and national origin, these are protected suspect classes that the Constitution says there's a big history of us sort of infringing on people in these areas. And we don't want to do that. But if we're going to do that with race in the form of college admissions, aren't we sort of making laws about that suspect class? I mean, we're literally saying that you can give people a boost based on their race. Ketanji saying, well, I can see how that is such a close call that might be a problem. But what if it's not that close call? What if it's just one variable out of many?
That we have here a program in which there are at least 40 different bases for being able to get a boost. And not everybody who is an underrepresented minority gets a boost. So it's really hard to figure out if anyone is being disadvantaged in a system like that. And that's where I was worried about standing, because I'm trying to understand how the system is operating to actually advantage minorities in a way that is harmful to anyone else in the system.
Yeah. 40 different variables. It's sort of convoluted. You say, hold on a minute. You can't just talk about race. And they say, perfect. Well, we'll talk about race and everything else. Hair color, eye color, location. Did you walk a little old lady across the street this morning? Yes or no? All of these things. And then the administrators can say, I don't care about all of that other crap. They just go right to the last page. What's the race? Oh, perfect. That's what we're looking for. But the application process, it includes all of these other variables so that it sort of makes it difficult to single out any one variable. And she says, well, if that's the case, then we can't actually show that there was harm caused to the applicants, right?
And I think that attributes to the careful cue that UNC has taken to this court's decisions in Fisher 2, making sure universities find themselves in this Goldilocks problem about considering it too much or too little. The university.
But there are other considerations, is the point. Everyone can get a boost for all sorts of reasons. Minorities don't automatically get a boost under this system, so it's hard to know whether anyone's being disadvantaged from the mere fact that a minority could get a boost in this environment, right?
That's right.
That's right. It is complicated. Other people are getting benefits. We can't ascribe any one benefit solely to a single variable. We've actually created a whole slew of variables. So now it's very hard to tell. And that's kind of by design, right? It's a feature, not a bug.
Evidence also bears it out at Petition Appendix 78, where the evidence showed that hundreds of white students with lower combined GPAs and SAT scores were admitted ahead of higher performing Black students, Latinx students who went to UNC. And I think that bears the hallmark of the type of individualized consideration that this court wanted.
Latinx in the Supreme Court. That's John Roberts saying, okay, thank you, counsel. We're done with your questions there. But Ketanji is asking, is there actual discrimination if it's only a boost and everybody can potentially get a boost? And he says, well, it is hard, but there are situations where there are white students who've actually gotten ahead based on their variables, right? And so you can say maybe like, you might have a race category and a life hardship category in addition to GPA and test scores. So you say, this person has equal GPA, equal test scores. This is a white guy. This is a Black guy. But the Black guy doesn't have a life hardship, let's say, and the other person does, right? The other person, I don't know, survived a tragic accident or whatever it is, right? And they say, wow, that person really had he's in a wheelchair or something. Okay, well, we need diversity for wheelchairs. And so the white guy actually got ahead. And so they say, in this case, we have identified a subset of the bigger subset where white people actually were ahead of some Black people who were, or whatever other demographics they're comparing here. I don't know. But there are instances where they actually got a boost because of other variables. And so they can point to that, and it gives them a nice little escape hatch to make their arguments. Now, Judge Alito is on the right side of the aisle, and Alito is making an argument about a concept called arbitrary and capricious. If you have a law that is so broad that you can impose it, you can interpret it in any way, shape, or form, it's kind of a violation of due process, right? And it's kind of a problem because that means that anybody who is in charge of executing the laws can do whatever the hell they want. The law is so broad that there really is no possibility of enforcing it without it being arbitrary and capricious. And we don't want big general laws that exist that way. We want a functional country. So we have a situation now. Judge Alito, who is a right-leaning judge, asked them about the checkboxes. If you've ever applied for anything, there's all these checkboxes. And are you this? Are you that? Do you identify in any one of these categories? Alito says, well, what's the point of that? Isn't that sort of arbitrary and capricious? I mean, so what if somebody checks we're Asian? What does that mean? That all Asians are the same? That somebody from China is the same as somebody from Afghanistan? What are you talking about here?
Justice Alito?
I'd like your response to the argument that these racial categories are so broad that any use of them is arbitrary and therefore unconstitutional. So what would you say to, for example, a student whose family came from Afghanistan and doesn't get in because the student doesn't get the plus factor that the student would get if the student's family had come from someplace else? So you would say to the student,
yeah, so the Afghanistan student, they're like, well, sorry, you don't fall into this checkbox. I mean, we actually prefer this other type of race. Is that fair?
We don't We don't need you to contribute to a diversity of views at our school because we already have enough Asians. We have a lot of students whose families came from China or other Asian countries. And the student says, well, you don't have anybody like me. I'm from Afghanistan. What similarity does a family background of a person from Afghanistan have with somebody whose family's background is in, let's say, Japan?
So respectfully, what you're describing is the exact opposite of how our process actually works on an individualized basis. We discussed this on page 11 of our brief. There was a Vietnamese student, the admissions officer testified about a Vietnamese student who immigrated to a remote part of North Carolina and thrived in that setting. And she testified undisputed that was a favorable aspect of her application.
That's an individual aspect of the application and something that has to do with her experience. But what is the justification for lumping together students whose families came from China with students whose families came from Afghanistan? What do they have in common?
So I agree that would be a strange rule, and that is not the rule that this court has established.
Well, then why do you have them check a box?
Why the box?
I'm Asian. What do you learn from the mere checking of the box?
So we think that it depends on the individual circumstances of that person. But
so you don't need the boxes at all.
So I think that is not necessarily true on an individualized basis. So another example. So we, again, as I discussed, we attempt very vigorously to recruit and enroll rural students. And we don't ask them to write their essay about how being from a rural background affects their sense of self and their experiences. But what we say is that person comes with something that we value.
Well, they may choose to write about it. But what's the answer to my question? Why do you have these boxes? Why do you give the student the opportunity to say, there's one thing about me, I'm Hispanic?
Because that's what they're looking for, Judge Alito. Hello. They don't care about all that other crap. They don't care about rural this or rural that or whatever life circumstances or essay tell me about this crap. They want the box, baby. They want to flip over to the box and just say, what is it? White guy. God. The worst. All right. Right. That's why. And he's going to tell you, well, no, it's a very multivariate analysis and we can come with all there, blah, 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 blah. But not really. And Judge Alito saying, well, why don't you just get rid of the boxes then? Because it seems like they're meaningless. If you have all of these variables, if all the variables matter, why do you have the boxes? Here's Judge Ketanji. Ketanji says that, well, if we don't have the boxes, if we don't get to check things, and we don't get to talk about race, isn't that discrimination against the people who want to talk about race?
Given a holistic review process like that, is there a risk of treating people differently by not allowing some applicants to talk about that aspect of their identity? I hear a process.
What if we want to talk about race?
There's a form that says, tell us about yourself, and people can put all sorts of things. I'm Catholic, I'm from, Los Angeles, I'm a Latina, whatever. But now we're entertaining a rule in which some people can say the things they want about who they are and have that valued in the system, but other people are not going to be able to, because they won't be able to reveal that they're Latino or African American or whatever. And I'm worried that creates an inequity in the system with respect to being able to express your identity and, importantly, have it valued by the university when it is considering the goal of bringing in different people. Is that a crazy worry, or is that something that I should be thinking about and concerned about?
So you always tell a Supreme Court judge, no, that's not crazy at all. Very, very brilliant, excellent question, Judge. But it is a good question because we have a concern about what the rule is, right? If you make race a part of this, you say, well, we can verify, we can sort of vet people, give them points, boost them, whatever, based on race. What happens if we don't? Is it the opposite rule? Do we say that you're not allowed to give them any benefits and privileges based on race? Or how do we sort of solve this? Are you not allowed to mention it? Or can it not be considered at all? If that's the opposite of it being heavily considered. It's a good question. Let's see what he says.
Not at all, Your Honor. Not crazy at all. We
not crazy.
Are very concerned with that issue, Your Honor, that if race is the one thing or if there are other factors that are subject to heightened scrutiny, if only those factors cannot be considered in the admissions process, then anyone with a background or perspective that doesn't fit into one of these categories will have an advantage in our admissions process. We think, just as Mr. Strawbridge said, that it's a mathematical exercise, and if you artificially say that only certain people can't tell the university about some of their important aspect of their background, but underrepresented minorities are barred from doing so, or all people can't discuss their racial background, then certain applicants will be subject to a disadvantage.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
Complicated question. The Supreme Court, of course, will issue their ruling. You can see the makeup of the court here. It is a 6-3 court. We've got 3 lefty judges. You see them here: Sotomayor, Kagan, and Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. They make up the 3 on the far right. The other judges are conservative, and we'll see if the conservative judges squeeze this one out. I am inclined to think that they will. We talked about this on the morning walk and talk for members this morning, but Judge John Roberts is somebody who has a problem with this. He said that, it's pretty disgusting what we do, dividing people up by race. And I'm very curious to see why Clarence Thomas is going to be the world's biggest racist after he votes to end affirmative action. But we'll see. And hopefully you join us as we wait for those rulings to come out. They should hit in the spring of next year. And of course, we will continue to cover it. Thank you for liking and subscribing wherever it is you're watching this. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.